Security cameras are supposed to make us feel safe, but sometimes they capture things that should never be seen. This footage was recorded by a night guard who worked alone. At first, the screen showed nothing unusual. But then, at exactly 3:14 a.m., something appeared in the hallway. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. What you're about to hear is the story behind that footage, and why no one ever talks about what really happened that night. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the empty lobby. It was a sound most people would never notice, but for Ethan Cole, it had become the soundtrack of his nights. He was 28, quiet, and dependable. The kind of man bosses liked because he never complained, never questioned, and never made mistakes. The building's night security was supposed to be the easiest job in the world. 10 floors of glass and steel. Empty conference rooms. Silent cubicles with screensaver fish swimming across dark monitors. At night, the corporate tower was a shell of itself, a hollow place filled with echoes and shadows. Ethan sat in the security office, a cramped room lined with monitors. 12 cameras in total, each feeding a different view of the building, lobby, stairwells, elevators, and a parking garage. For years, the cameras had shown nothing but stillness. He often joked to himself that he wasn't a guard. He was just a man paid to stare at empty hallways. At least until that night. It was a little after midnight when Ethan noticed it. On camera 7, which showed the north stairwell, the screen flickered. For a moment, he thought it was just static, a glitch he'd seen before. But when the image sharpened, he froze. Someone was standing there. The stairwell was supposed to be empty, locked after hours, with no access unless you had a keycard. But there, half hidden in the shadows, stood a tall, dark figure. It didn't move, didn't shift its weight, just stood. Ethan leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. What the hell? The figure's head was tilted upward, as if looking directly at the camera. Ethan's first instinct was that maybe a late-night employee had gotten stuck. He picked up his flashlight, left the security room, and walked briskly through the silent halls toward the north stairwell. His footsteps echoed. He pushed open the heavy stairwell door, expecting to see someone there. But the space was empty. The stairs wound upward in silence, the air stale and cold. No movement, no one, just the buzzing of the emergency light overhead. Ethan's pulse quickened. He scanned every landing with his flashlight, but the stairwell was deserted. After several minutes, he exhaled and shook his head. Maybe the camera had glitched. Maybe it caught an afterimage of someone earlier. Back in the security office, he sat down again, forcing a laugh under his breath. I'm losing it. Then his eyes flicked back to camera 7. The figure was still there, exactly where it had been before, still staring straight at the lens. Ethan's stomach dropped. He had just been in that stairwell. He knew it was empty, and yet, on the screen, the figure remained. He leaned closer, trying to make out its face. The footage was grainy, but as the pixels shifted, he thought he saw the faint outline of a smile. Wide, unnatural. Ethan's hands hovered over the controls. His instinct screamed at him to shut the monitor off, but something deeper, curiosity, dread, obsession, kept him locked in place. The figure didn't move for minutes, just stared, that eerie grin stretching wider. Finally, Ethan forced himself to look away, rubbing his eyes. When he glanced back, the screen was normal again. Empty stairwell. No one there. Ethan sat in silence, the hum of the monitors suddenly deafening. He considered calling his supervisor, but what would he even say? That a camera showed him a ghost? That he'd chased something that wasn't there? He shook his head and opened his thermos of coffee, trying to steady his nerves. Long night, he muttered. Just tired. For the rest of his shift, the cameras showed nothing unusual. By dawn, when the first employees arrived and the building stirred back to life, Ethan convinced himself it had been a trick of the eye, a shadow, a glitch. But when he clocked out and stepped into the morning air, something about the building felt different. Heavy, as if the glass tower was watching him leave. That night, he returned for another shift. The same silent building, the same fluorescent hum. He sat in the same chair, watching the monitors. For the first 3 hours, everything was calm. But at 2:07 a.m., camera 7 flickered again. The stairwell lit up with static, and when it cleared, the figure was back. This time, it wasn't standing in the shadows. It was 2 steps closer to the camera, closer than the night before. And the smile? Wider. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted between the door to the stairwell and the screen. He didn't move. He couldn't. Something deep inside him whispered that if he opened that door again, this time he might not come back. He forced himself to look at the other monitors, scanning the rest of the building. All clear. Empty. Normal. Only camera 7 showed the impossible. He leaned forward, whispering, "What do you want?" For a second, he swore the figure's head tilted, like it hurt him. Ethan's hands trembled. He glanced at the digital clock above the monitors, 2:12 a.m. Just under an hour left in his shift. He tried to hold out, tried to look anywhere but that one monitor. But his eyes were drawn back, over and over. Each time the figure seemed different, more solid, more real. And then, just before 3 a.m., it happened. The figure's mouth moved. Ethan leaned, so close his forehead nearly touched the screen, straining to make out the motion. And then, in the grainy static, he swore he saw it. The lips forming words. 2 words. "I see you." Ethan stumbled back, knocking his chair into the wall. His heart hammered as he turned in every direction, scanning the office. The air felt colder, heavier, like someone had just stepped into the room with him. He forced his shaking hands to turn back to the monitor. The figure was still there, still smiling. But this time, it wasn't just staring at the camera. It was staring at him. The next morning, Ethan could barely keep his eyes open as he drove home. His shift ended at 6, but the memory of that smiling figure haunted him all the way into daylight. He hadn't told anyone, not his supervisor, not his co-workers, not even the maintenance team. Because how do you explain something like that without sounding insane? Still, by late afternoon, after a few restless hours of sleep, Ethan convinced himself it had been nothing more than exhaustion. Too much caffeine, not enough rest. The human brain could do cruel tricks in the quiet hours of the night. But when he walked back into the building that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that the walls themselves seemed to breathe. The security office was the same as always, dim, stale-smelling, with rows of glowing monitors casting pale light across his face. Ethan sat down, notebook in hand. He had decided to document everything. If it happened again, he'd have proof. For the first 2 hours, nothing. Just the hum of the monitors and the faint buzz of the vending machine outside the office. He wrote down the time, the silence, the boredom. Then, at exactly 1:48 a.m., camera 7 flickered. His breath caught as the static cleared, and the figure was back. Same stairwell, same shadow-drenched form. But now it wasn't still. Its head was tilted to the side, twitching slightly, as though the footage itself was broken. Ethan grabbed his phone and recorded the monitor, zooming in on the figure. The timestamp glowed, 1 hour, 48 minutes, and 27 seconds. He filmed for almost a full minute, his hand trembling, before the screen blinked and the stairwell was empty again. Heart hammering, he replayed the recording on his phone. But the footage showed nothing. Just an empty stairwell, time-stamped 1:48 a.m. No, ita muterid. His hands shook as he scrolled back, trying to find the proof. But it wasn't there. The video he had seen live was gone, erased, overwritten by something impossible. That's when he heard it. The creak of the stairwell door down the hall. Ethan froze, his skin prickling. No one should be in the building. Cleaning staff left hours ago. He rose slowly, flashlight in hand, and stepped out into the corridor. The stairwell door at the end of the hall stood open, just a crack, swaying gently. The metal handle gleamed under the dim lights. He forced his legs forward, each step heavier than the last. He pushed the door open with the tip of his flashlight and shone the beam down the stairwell. Empty. But just as he turned to leave, a faint whisper drifted upward. A voice, low and garbled, like a recording played in reverse. Ethan's blood ran cold. He slammed the door shut and stumbled back into the office, locking it behind him. His hands trembled as he scribbled in the notebook, 1:48 a.m. Figure appeared. Tried recording. Playback erased. Stairwell door opened. Whispering voice. He stared at the words on the page, his breath uneven. He wasn't imagining this. He wasn't tired. Something was happening in this building. The next night, he arrived early, desperate for answers. That's when Mrs. Ruiz, the night cleaner, stopped him in the lobby. She was in her 60s, wiry and quiet, the kind of woman who noticed more than she said. "You're pale," she remarked, pausing with her mop. "The night shift getting to you?" Ethan hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You ever see anything strange here?" Mrs. Ruiz's dark eyes flicked up to his, unreadable. Then she said, "Strange things happen after midnight. Cameras don't lie." Ethan swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" But she only shook her head and walked away, leaving a trail of wet footprints on the polished floor. That night, Ethan stayed glued to the monitors. He barely blinked, his eyes aching, his notebook open and ready. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. came and went. And then, at 2:06 a.m., his worst fear materialized. On camera 7, the stairwell lit up once more. But this time, the figure wasn't alone. Another shape appeared beside it. Shorter, bent, its movements jerky, like an old puppet. Ethan's throat tightened as both figures turned, simultaneously, toward the camera. He fumbled for his phone, recording the monitor again. But before he could focus, the screen glitched. Thick static rolled across every monitor in the room. One by one, the other cameras, the lobby, the elevator, the parking garage, all filled with the same two figures. Standing, staring, closer. Ethan's hand shook so violently he nearly dropped his phone. His breath came in shallow gasps as the figures drew nearer on the screens, impossibly appearing in places he knew were empty. He squeezed his eyes shut, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." When he opened them again, the monitors cleared. Empty building. Silent halls. Except for one camera. Camera 3. The security office. On the screen, Ethan saw himself sitting in his chair, eyes wide, breathing hard. And behind him, in the grainy footage, the figure, standing in a room. By sunrise, Ethan was a wreck. He had left the building in a daze. The phantom image of that figure behind him on camera 3 burned into his memory. He hadn't dared look over his shoulder in the moment. He couldn't. But the terror of not knowing lingered with him. Was it really there, standing behind him? Or was it just another trick of the cameras? That day, he didn't sleep. Instead, he drove to the public library and dug through old records of the building. Blueprints, property transfers, news clippings. Anything. What he found made his stomach turn. Decades ago, long before the tower was remodeled, the north stairwell had been the site of an accident. An employee, a man named Daniel Kerr, had fallen 10 stories to his death. But the coroner's report suggested something wasn't right. Kerr's injuries didn't match a normal fall. His body had been found at the base of the stairs, but with his face twisted into a frozen grin. The incident was quietly buried. No charges. No suspects. The stairwell was sealed for years before being reopened during renovations. Ethan shut the dusty file with trembling hands. His gut told him the figure on camera 7 wasn't just a glitch. It was Kerr, or what was left of him. That night, when Ethan returned to his shift, he felt the weight of the building pressing down harder than ever. The hallways seemed darker, the silence heavier. Every creak of the pipes made his nerves spike. He turned on the monitors. For the first hour, all was calm. He wrote down the times, forced himself to sip his coffee, try to breathe normally, but the dread never left. He knew the figure would come back, and at 2:14 a.m. it did. Camera 7 buzzed, static tearing across the screen, and then there it was, Kerr's shadowy form, standing halfway up the stairs. Only this time, something was different. Its movements weren't random. The figure was mirroring him. When Ethan leaned forward toward the monitor, the figure leaned forward on the stair. When Ethan rubbed his temple, the figure's hand twitched upward in the same motion. "No," Ethan whispered, backing away. "No, no, no." He stumbled to the corner of the room, staring at the monitor in disbelief. It wasn't a ghost replaying old events. It was copying him, watching him, learning him. Then, without warning, the other monitors flickered too. On camera 5, the lobby, Ethan saw himself, sitting in his chair, just as he was now. But in the footage, his reflection wasn't still. He flipped through the feeds, camera 2, camera 9, camera 12, all showing him in the same chair but with slight differences. In one, his reflection's eyes were rolled completely black. In another, he was standing behind the desk, grinning at the lens. In another, he was walking down the hall, even though he hadn't moved. The monitors were no longer windows into the building. They were windows into something else. Something watching him. Ethan forced himself to breathe, gripping the desk so hard his knuckles turned white. His notebook lay open in front of him. He scrawled down every detail, his handwriting jagged, figures now mirroring me. Cameras showing alternate versions of myself. Cannot trust what I see. The air in the office grew colder, each breath fogging faintly. Ethan rubbed his arms, staring at the clock. 2:55 nachts. He needed to last just one more hour. One more. But then, camera 1 lit up. It was the elevator feed. At first, it looked normal, the empty lift sitting on the ground floor. Then, with a sudden lurch, the doors slid open, and Ethan saw himself walk out. Not the real Ethan. Another version. Pale. Eyes hollow. Smile stretched wide. Too wide, splitting his face unnaturally. The fake Ethan stepped out into the lobby, moving stiffly, puppet-like. Ethan's real body went rigid. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. His eyes darted between the elevator feed and the hallway outside his office, waiting, dreading. On camera 8, the hallway view flickered. The fake Ethan was there now, closer to the security room. On camera 4, it appeared again, at the stairwell landing, head jerking unnaturally as it climbed. Every monitor now showed the imposter moving closer. 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 Until finally, camera 3 lit up again, the office feed. And there it was, standing just outside the door to the room Ethan sat in. Ethan's heart pounded so hard, he thought it would burst from his chest. He staggered back, clutching his flashlight, sweat dripping down his temples. No, it's not real, he whispered, trying to convince himself. It's not real. It can't be. Then he noticed something. On the camera 3 feed, the timestamp was wrong. It wasn't showing 3 a.m. It was showing 3:14 a.m. The future. And on the screen, Ethan watched in horror as the door to the office opened on its own. The fake Ethan stepped inside, moving toward the chair. Moving toward him. Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. The timestamp glowed at the bottom. 3:14 a.m. A time that hadn't happened yet. A time creeping closer by the second. On the footage, the imposter Ethan, pale skin, hollow eyes, crooked grin, was already inside the office. It walked slowly, stiffly toward the desk, toward the chair, toward him. But in reality, Ethan sat frozen in that same chair, staring at the monitors, unable to move. The seconds ticked by. 2:56 a.m. His breath came fast and shallow. He snatched up his notebook and scrawled. Camera 3 showing future timestamp. Doppelganger entering office. 3:14 a.m. His handwriting was so jagged it barely looked like words. The air in the office felt heavy, suffocating. He checked the hallway monitor. Empty. Checked the stairwell feed. Empty. Checked the lobby. Empty. For now. But on camera 3, the imposter was closer. One hand reaching out toward the desk. Ethan slammed his notebook shut. He couldn't sit there waiting. He needed proof. He needed to know if this was real or just some twisted loop of video. He pulled his phone out, set it up on the corner of the desk, and hit record. If anyone finds this, he whispered hoarsely, something is happening in this building. Check the cameras. Check the footage. I don't know if I'll... His voice cracked. I don't know if I'll make it. 3:02 nachts. A sudden pop echoed through the building. The lights flickered, buzzing angrily. All 12 monitors scrambled with static before snapping back into focus. But now every single camera, the lobby, the stairwell, the garage, even the empty break room, showed the same thing. The imposter. Dozens of them, each one slightly different. Some taller, some shorter, some smiling too wide, some missing eyes altogether. Every screen filled with twisted versions of Ethan, all turning slowly, in unison, to stare directly at the real Ethan in the office. He gasped and stumbled back, knocking his chair over. No, no, no. 3:05 a.m. The power flickered again. The vending machine in the hall clunked loudly, spilling cans onto the tile. Ethan grabbed his flashlight, the beam cutting a shaky line across the walls. He wanted to run, but where? Out the front doors? Down the garage ramp? Could he even make it in time? His eyes darted back to camera 3. The imposter Ethan was now standing behind the desk. It leaned down toward the chair, its wide grin stretching further until the skin of its face seemed ready to split. 3:08 nachts. A low hum filled the air, deep and vibrating through the walls. The monitors flickered, the images warping and tearing as though the building itself was groaning in protest. Then Ethan's phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. He picked it up with trembling hands, pressing it to his ear. Static crackled on the line. Then a voice, his own voice, distorted, broken, whispered, "Don't turn around." Ethan dropped the phone like it burned him. His chest heaved as he stumbled backward, eyes glued to the monitors. On camera 3, the imposter Ethan's head twitched violently, jerking toward the lens. Its mouth opened, wider and wider, until its jaw hung unnaturally low. And then, on the live feed, the office door handle began to turn. 3:11 nachts. Ethan lunged forward, shoving the desk chair against the door. His hand shook as he braced it, praying the lock would hold. The handle rattled, harder now, metal clanging in the silent hall. On camera 8, the hallway feed flickered, and there it was, the imposter, standing right outside the office door. It lifted its head, grin splitting ear to ear. 3:12 nachts. The lights above Ethan's head popped one by one, plunging the office into near darkness. The only illumination came from the monitors, glowing cold and blue. He scrambled back, pressing himself against the far wall, the beam of his flashlight dancing wildly. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating in his bones. On every monitor, the imposters pressed closer to their respective cameras, faces filling the screens. Their mouths moved in unison, forming words Ethan couldn't hear, until the static cleared. Join us. 3:13 a.m. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Sweat poured down his temples. He fumbled for his phone, the recording still running. He wanted to scream for help, but his throat was dry, his voice broken. On camera 3, the imposter Ethan bent down, placing its pale hands on the desk. It tilted its head to the side, as if listening for something. And then it turned, staring directly out of the monitor. Directly at him. Ethan dropped his flashlight. His legs nearly buckled. The clock above the monitors ticked once. Twice. 3:14 nachts. The office door creaked open. The door to the security office swung open with a slow, agonizing creak. Ethan's flashlight lay on the floor, its beam rolling across the walls. The only steady light came from the monitors, 12 glowing screens casting cold blue shadows over his face. His chest heaved as the chair he'd wedged against the door slid uselessly across the floor. The air in the office turned icy, his breath visible in short, panicked bursts. On camera 3, the imposter Ethan stepped fully into the room. The timestamp still read 3:14 a.m. But here, in real time, the clock above his head ticked over to match it. 3:14. The imposter was here. It stood in the doorway, head tilted unnaturally, jaw hanging open wider than humanly possible. Its grin was a grotesque mirror of his own face. Ethan backed against the wall, eyes darting between the figure in the doorway and the monitors that all showed the same thing. Himself, dozens of hims, each one staring, smiling, whispering silently. Stay back, Ethan choked out, raising his shaking hands. You're not real. The imposter tilted its head the other way, movements jerky like a broken marionette. Its hollow eyes glistened under the monitor glow. Then, in a voice that was both his own and something far older, it whispered, "You are." Ethan froze. The words cut through him like ice. Before he could move, the imposter lunged. The monitors exploded into static as the room shook violently. Ethan's phone, still recording on the desk, clattered to the floor, capturing only fractured images. Ethan's terrified face, the blur of movement, the sound of his scream drowned beneath a roar of static. The feed cut out at 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 32 seconds. Silence. When a morning shift arrived, the building was quiet as always. Too quiet. The security office door stood ajar, but inside there was no sign of Ethan. No overturned furniture. No blood. No evidence of a struggle. The only thing left was his notebook, sitting neatly on the desk. The final entry scrawled in frantic, broken handwriting. 3:14 a.m. It's coming through the cameras. And the phone. Detectives recovered the device, its last video file corrupted. Forensic experts tried to restore it, but what they found made things worse. The footage showed Ethan alone in the room, staring at the monitors. He whispered into the camera, "If anyone finds this," then the static began. For 20 seconds, the video glitched, warping Ethan's face, stretching it, replacing it with smiling duplicates. And then, at 3:14, the screen went black. But not completely. In the final frame, just before the file ended, a faint reflection appeared. Not of Ethan, not of the office, but of the viewer. Whoever watched the footage saw themselves staring back, faint and distorted, as if the camera had captured their image from across time. Rumors spread quickly. Some said Ethan ran away, driven mad by the long shifts. Others whispered he'd been pulled into the cameras, trapped forever in some looping nightmare. The building's management erased the story from their records. The stairwell cameras were quietly disconnected. A new security guard was hired. But those who worked the night shift whispered about the tapes. How every so often, when the lights flicker around 3 a.m., the monitors flash for just a second. And in that second, you can see him. Ethan, still sitting in that chair, still staring, still smiling.